A lot of people say, thank God for the pandemic. Now I have an excuse to not ever go anywhere ever again. Like it's like their inner introverts are now being fed, like and encouraged. The other thing is it's that so our mingling muscles have atrophied because of the pandemic. So there's that. And and then people got out of the habit, but people also don't know how to, they actually forgot how to do it. So that increases their fear of going. And in addition, because of the new workplace where a lot of people now are working remotely, at least partially, at least half the week they're working remotely. A lot of people are working remotely all the time. And that also keeps people in their pajamas or, with their dog and their families. And why would they go out to a party? When you were working at an office, you would say, oh, I'll stop by that cocktail party after work. You're already out, you're already dressed nicely. And, it was fine. I'll go to the bar with have a drink with my coworkers. That was just part of the thing. So this working remotely is basically killed. I tell you, when I first heard the term social distancing, there was a big noise went off in my head. Like there goes my whole mission in life.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome Deroy, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan, and I'm excited to be back. And I'm particularly excited about this episode that we're doing with Jeanne today.
Yeah, very exciting. Well, before we get to Jeanne and to introducing you, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and also check out our YouTube channel because we don't just do a podcast. We also put it on our YouTube channel, Narrative. So go and look that up. And you will find lots and lots of resources on our website, narrative.com, narativ.com/podcast, where you can also find all of our previous episodes. So go ahead and subscribe and leave a review. Thank you so much. All right. So today, our guest is Jeanne Martinet. She is the author of 9 books, including Mingling with the Enemy, a social survival guide for our divided era, and the best-selling The Art of Mingling, which has sold more than 150,000 copies and been published in 10 countries. She's been featured in such publications as the New York Times, Salon, the Boston Globe, the LA Times, and the Washington Post. Jeanne has shared her humor and mingling know-how on hundreds of TV shows, radio shows, and podcasts, including NBC's Today Show and NPR's Morning Edition. She lives in New York City. Thank you, Jeanne, for being here, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Yeah. So I want to get into the story behind the creation of the Art of Mingling and how that sort of work evolved into Mingling with the Enemy. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. I had worked in publishing for about 6 years, and then the company was went under basically. And right after that, I was at a wedding. I was invited to a wedding in Ohio, and it was it was all my college friends, and it was in Dayton, Ohio. And after the reception, my friends all came up to me and said, Jeanne, you talked to everyone in the entire city of Dayton, Ohio in that reception, and while the rest of us just talked to each other, like, what, why, and how did you do that? And for fun, I started writing down my techniques on a cocktail napkin, which is where I think all good books start, on a cocktail napkin, at least in my life. And I just realized that A, I really loved doing it, and B, I did have some special wisdom and tricks and tips in this area. So, and I did know how a book proposal was supposed to look because I had worked in publishing for 6 years. So I went ahead and just as a lark, sent out a proposal for The Art of Mingling. And I thought it was just going to be this little side thing I did in my life, but immediately got on the Today Show. So the whole thing exploded. And that's when I realized how many people in the country or the world have this fear of going into a room and talking to strangers.
Mm, yeah.
I can attest to that because I do coaching, as does Jerome, is one of the many things. And that comes up so many times when we're talking about networking and how to reach out to strangers and get comfortable with ourselves. And then, well, we were the benefit of somebody helping us because we met at an event when somebody introduced us and said, you two should talk to each other. And, good things happen. So yes, I think you're totally on the money and have been about we all need to learn and kind of demystify that whole act of mingling and connecting with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious, Jean, how this kind of evolved into mingling with the enemy. And I know we alluded to this in the introduction in terms of the divided era and polarization and all that. But
Yeah.
what kind of inspired you to take it there?
Well, I'm obviously a very social person, and so I don't know, about 5 years ago or so, I started realizing that even amongst people of my own political persuasion, when I would go out to dinner with them or be at parties, things were devolving into angry conversations a lot more than they ever had before. And which is, makes it's not a fun time. It's not, I don't think, what we're supposed to be doing when we're socializing at a party. So I started thinking about why is that happening and how can we keep that from happening so much, and ideally also, I mean, the problem is that the more that happens, the then people don't want to go to the parties, and that
Mm,
of course is, my mission in life is to keep people socializing face to face, which I think is really important for our societal and personal health. And so I started trying to figure out why this was happening and how to keep it from happening for me, and also how to intercede and help other people learn how to keep themselves from going over the edge in these
mm,
conversations. I mean, my friends, I feel like they had more arguments about people had more arguments about Hillary, versus the other candidate than they did even about the Democrats versus the Republicans. People were so ready for a fight.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of become this the through line of conversations. Unfortunately, is that yeah, it can devolve.
And
Sorry,
all,
Julie.
all conversations now lead to politics.
Right.
The weather leads to climate change. You talk about how is your health, which was the two safe conversations in the Victorian era were your health and the weather. And now those two topics are actually time bombs. So, because climate change and healthcare. So,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there was other time bomb too, which I'm saying it's not even just those topics. It's we've all had family situation, or maybe I did, where we had certain relatives or people that was a moment in time where you had a limited amount of time before they start to get animated or negative or start to dredge up history from the past, and you were stuck. So what I loved about your book is you confirmed all the pivots that we need to do, that
yeah,
not and planning sometimes things and figuring out the choreography and the timing of things. So
right.
I'm interested in here, not from mine, I could go on forever, but I wanted everybody to take the benefit of some of your tried and true methods
Yeah.
of coping
I
when
mean, it's funny what you say about planning, because while you don't want to, study up for going to a party, it is good to have a couple of tricks in your pocket. If I know that I'm going to see a relative of mine who's a um, Trump supporter, I'll just say that. I know that I'm going to maybe need some of these tricks, so I'll have them in my mind. And most of them are just subject changing tricks, diversions. If you're not somebody who can do anything too sophisticated, you can just do what I call the pole vault, which is just to simply just change the subject. Like, well, hey, I mean, we need to ask you, just change the subject that way. There's also free association, or what I call bridge building, which is, let's say someone's talking about, a statue in their city that they, there's a big controversy about. You say something like, and you realize it's about to get really heated. You say something like, that I can't believe there's how many old statues are still around. And then you can say, my father had a statue of his grandmother that we had in our living room, and we never knew whether it was made out of marble or, that's a weird example, but you just have to try to use your brain to get to another place. You build a bridge over to another topic. You can also, if you're at a party and you're drinking, I feel like it's a very good method to use to make a toast. And so you just, in the people start going, well, I don't know what you mean by that. And you just raise your glass and you say, here's to a difference of opinion, and then off to another subject. There are many ways you can do this. If you really want to escape from the group altogether, like you realize that these two people are going to argue and I'm not going to stop them, but I want out. You can sometimes use the human sacrifice, which is which is a little devious. But when somebody else is coming by you in the party that you grab them, not physically, but you get them attention and you put them into the group. And as soon as they're introducing each other, you can leave. Because as soon as there's a change, a shift in the group dynamic, it's actually really easy just to walk away.
Yeah. I love those.
Room is the big excuse, which is usually true. I'm always going or to or from, and that's been my go-to place to just exit gracefully.
Yeah. I mean, there's a rule I have in the Art of Mingling, my first book. There's a rule, there's 5 laws of survival, and one of them is change equals movement, movement equals change. So like always that the shift, whenever anybody else comes in or goes out, the dynamic's very easy to change everything.
Okay.
Yeah. It also sounds like having a sense of humor, and kind of a positive attitude or mindset, whatever you want to call it, is something I'm also reading through the lines, because I would imagine that if you're going into a social situation and you're, kind of thinking of how am I going to navigate all this, or, oh no, this person's going to be there and I really don't agree with them. It all gets really kind of negative and you start to feel the anger and the resentment, as opposed to
Yeah,
coming in with
that's
something else, something.
yeah, that's actually true. You have to, it's all, releasing the fear is always a good idea for any situation, but
Mm,
that your number one goal in any social situation is to have fun. Like
mm,
all other goals should be put aside. And if you just have to, like, when I enter a room full of people, I think of it as a table full of delicious food, that I get to pick and choose from. So that anticipation of the joy of meeting other people and talking to other people and what conversations you might have should definitely be first and foremost. And that does, your attitude certainly helps. That is for
mm.
sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I love that, and I love the kind of practicalities of this too. I'm curious, as we talk obviously a lot about storytelling, because that's what we're about. This is something we ask often of our guests: is how you see the role of storytelling, or how maybe you've used it in your own kind of professional life or personal life.
Yeah, stories are super important. And in fact, there's a story whenever I'm in a faux pas situation where I've done something really like embarrassing, like forgetting someone's name that I really should
Mm.
know, or the worst one of all, assuming someone's pregnant when they're not pregnant. I mean, like really, that's the worst faux pas in the world. If you do something really bad and you're at a party, I like to do what I call storytelling as a healing technique. And
Mm,
what I do is I say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, but if you think that was bad." uh, I want to tell you about the time I did this. And then I tell this story, which is the following story, which is years ago when I was first working in publishing. For various reasons, I had lost my job and I was interviewing. I had an interview with the famous Erica Jong. Now, younger people might not know that Erica Jong at the time was a very famous author. She wrote Fear of Flying and other books. And I had an interview to be her assistant. But at the time, for various reasons, I had a broken foot and it was raining. And I finally got to her townhouse apartment on Park Avenue. And I was like sort of bedraggled and I had my muddy crutches. I was not in good shape. I was late for the interview. So I was in a horrible state. And I rang the doorbell and the housekeeper let me in. And Erica Jong came sweeping down the stairs in something glamorous. And she put out her hand and I put out my hand. She said, "Hello, I'm Erica Jong." And I said, "Hello, I'm Erica Jong." I introduced myself as her. I just even forgot my name. And then we all just like stood there for a minute and stared at each other. It was like nobody knew what had happened. I ended up being offered the job. I think she was so impressed that I had actually forgotten my name because I was impressed by her. Anyway, I did not take that job. But
Uh,
that story always gets a laugh, and it will dispel any tension or embarrassment that
mm.
I caused in that moment by my current faux pas.
That's so interesting because it's like we've talked about on this podcast with our guests, how to kind of diffuse tension and situations that are tough, especially in a corporate setting or professional life, but even in a personal life as well. And very often the angle is kind of like, well, we talk a lot about let's acknowledge our failures and challenges, and sort of learn from them. And I
Mhm.
love that you're actually taking, but it's not always the case that someone will actually go right in and tell that story. But the context in which you found a way to tell that story, I love that because it's both humorous and it acknowledges that you're only human. And
Right,
and it also acknowledges the other person for just saying, well, yeah, hey, you think that was bad, but let me tell you this story. I would imagine that also diffuses what dispels whatever they were feeling, about the mistake you made about them. It's sort of like,
right,
oh yeah, I don't care about that anymore because now I'm laughing with Jeanne about this time she had.
right. Yes, no, it does serve several purposes, and it only
Yeah.
works if you have to tell the story as it has to be about you making a mistake. You can't tell
Right.
a story about that. That's important that it's self-deprecating in that way. That
Yeah.
because it's part of the apology to basically
I
say it's me, not you.
Yeah. 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 No, I love that. I love that.
So you
That's
have
great.
history in that department and you learned from the past, and now this is going to be another learning moment for you. I love this because when we coach a lot, sometimes we have many different generations in the same room in our workshops, and a lot of times up and coming people would rather use their phone. They feel like there's the period of safety in interacting with that, even if they're in the same room. And part of conversations is they're unpredictable. They're unscripted. They can go here, they can go there. And part of the beauty of that is also part of the fear that goes into it. We no longer have total control. And I think your tool, our tool, is everything that helps us navigate that and just reminds us to be human, that it's not perfect. It's not meant to be perfect, but to keep trying to improve on it. So I think you give some good advice along the way of simple things to navigate.
Hmm.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder often about this, in terms of, and I think this is a good context to talk about it as well. you know, going to, you talked about the importance of, meeting with people in person. And there have been many, many articles about the epidemic of loneliness that is underlying so many health issues in this country in particular, but all over really. And I'm curious, and of course, the pandemic didn't help any of this because we got used to not having to meet anybody in person. We were forced not to meet anybody in person. So as a result, that we developed other skills. But I'm curious from your point of view, how do you believe the pandemic has affected people's kind of social skills and ability to actually even go to these mingling opportunities? And yeah, I'm curious how you see that.
Well, had a very bad effect, in my opinion.
Mm.
First of all, people got used to not going to anything. So there's that. So I talk to a lot of people now, and they even more than before, they say, well, why would I bother going to that? I'm fine, I've lived for all these years, and a lot of people say, thank God for the pandemic. Now I have an excuse to not ever go anywhere ever again. Like it's like their inner introverts are now being fed, like
Mm.
and encouraged. The other thing is it's that so our mingling muscles have atrophied because of the pandemic. So there's that, and and then people got out of the habit, but people also don't know how to, they actually forgot how to do it. So that increases their fear of going. And in addition, because of the new workplace where a lot of people now are working remotely, at least partially, at least half the week they're working remotely. A lot of people are working remotely all the time. And that also keeps people in their pajamas or, in with their dog and their families. And why would they go out to a party when you were working at an office? You would say, "Oh, I'll stop by that cocktail party after work." You're already out, you're already dressed nicely, and it was fine. I'll go to the bar with my, have a drink with my coworkers. That was just part of the thing. So this working remotely is basically killed. I tell you, when I first heard the term social distancing, there was a big noise went off in my head. Like there goes my whole mission in life. Social
Mhm.
distancing. Oh my God, what the heck is that? That is like, talk about I mean, it's a disease in itself.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been really bad. I think that I have seen a lot of articles though written about the need and the desire to get back to mingling. So I feel like it's such an intrinsic disease and motivation that I think people, if you lead the way, which I'm trying to do, people will go back to it because I think
Yeah.
people I've heard of parties with young people where their phones are taken at the door. My niece who lives in Texas, she said, "I can't reach you because I'm going to this party," and they take your phones at the door. And I was like, thank God, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Jean, I thought of you this past weekend. There was an article in the Times, at the New York Times on Sunday about this young people in college level. They started a Luddite organization for flip phones and being less tech in their social life to regain the human connection, and everything comes into it. But I do know from coaching clients that a lot of up and coming were being very thoughtful with what they're doing with their time. They said, I want to be in person. So I'm picking and choosing events that push me out of my comfort zone, and I get to be in person and have an experience that I wouldn't have on my own, in my head, in my little corner of the world. So I think that's something to build on. And
Yeah, I'm hoping that will become more of a movement.
mhm,
In fact, I hosted a party last year, a millennial mingle and
mm,
everybody who came had to be under 40. And I gathered together about, I don't know, it was like 25, 30 people. And at least 10 of them came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you so much for having this. This is the only party I've been to since I moved to New York that isn't that where there are people my age. That
Mhm.
nobody, they're not going out to do this anymore." So
Mhm.
anyway, but let's hope that's changing.
mhm.
Absolutely. And I think your book and books actually offer, the a kind of antidote or really the what's the word I'm looking for? Manual, really, for, what are these techniques? You gave us a few great examples there, but I think that's also what people need. I mean, I see it in our work at Narrative, the fact that we're not just telling people to tell stories as a way of better being able to connect with others. We're actually telling them how you can do that, right? Step by step. And
Yes.
that really comforts people, that reassures people,
Hmm.
so that ironically they can actually, armed with that, go into more uncomfortable situations for them. And I see your book as doing something very similar, where it's very
Yeah.
practical.
I mean, it is very gratifying because I do, especially when the book was first published. I got a lot of emails from people who told me that I had helped them and that they had gone to a party and they met their fiance, or they were going to go, and then they read my book and they just took a couple of tips and they had a great time. And I mean, when I get those emails, I'm so happy.
Yeah, it's the best. Yeah, yeah. Well, wonderful. I want to make sure we get to the question that we ask of all of our guests on this podcast, and that is, would you tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today, still kind of influences you in some way?
I think the best one I can think of is years ago, right when I got out of college, I didn't know what I was doing. I was completely lost. I was living in Charlottesville, Virginia. I was drinking too much. I was living with an alcoholic restaurant owner, And I just didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was really like, I mean, he was charming. I was having a great time, but I was going nowhere. And I got myself together and I applied. In one night I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to do something with my life. And I applied to the Denver Publishing Institute, which I just put all of my remaining, brain and energy into the application for this summer course that was hard to get into. And I got into the Denver Publishing Institute in the summer of whatever. And it changed my life. I first of all, I did really well there. I met all these great people. I met everybody from New York Publishing teaches there. So I made all these contacts. And that was my turning point in my life. Then after that, I came to New York. I had interviews. I got a job in publishing, and that's really started my career. I have to mention one other thing though, and that is that when I was 16 years old, because I couldn't decide between these two moments, when I was 16, my grandmother lived in our house and on the third floor, and I would go up and visit her. And one time when I was about 16 or maybe 13, I went up there and she told me, I have a secret to tell you. And I said, what? And she said, you have LOP. And I said, what is LOP? And she said, loads of personality. and, and I think really it's a small moment, but it was funny because I think after she told me that, I started realizing that I had the ability to entertain people. And
Mm.
I do feel like that moment also set me on the path of wanting to, like, I would go to parties after that and I would think, I have LOP. And so I think that also influenced me a lot.
That helps. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Your brand right then, ahead of her times. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks so much for sharing those stories with us. It's always great to kind of get a little bit of that personal touch and go back into your own history to reveal something to us. It's always very exciting. So thank you for doing that.
You're
And
welcome.
yeah, and what a great message as well, because I particularly like, or I relate, I should say, to the stories that sort of begin with, I don't know what I was doing, or I didn't
mhm.
really know where I was going. And then something happens and you decide to turn it around. I think that's just so inspiring for so many people who maybe are finishing college and wondering what they're going to do.
Hmm.
It's always great to kind of see the person many years later sort of saying, hey, here I am now. So there's hope for everyone. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I know
You're
it's a
so
long.
welcome.
And just to build on Jerome's, both stories have about you being curious and showing up. So you got curious about the school in Denver and saying, we're going to try something different, and showed up in person and went someplace, pull yourself
Mm.
out. And then to your granny, that you showed up upstairs.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, yeah,
want to
yeah,
get a conversation and learn something. So showing up
yeah.
is a big thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and I want to encourage all our listeners to check out your books, Jeanne Martinet, and The Art of Mingling and Mingling with the Enemy. Really worth a read, and yeah, worth kind of getting onto the bandwagon of this movement of having people mingle in person. So important. So thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge and wisdom with us. And is there anything else that you would want to share, Jeanne, with our audience? Any?
I mean, only that when you get an invitation to that party and you think, ah, I don't think I want to go, I want you to go.
Mm,
Go to the
excellent.
party, go to the event, go to the dinner, go out.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to take that to heart too. Thank you so much. Anything else, Julienne, that you wanted to
I
say?
just
Or?
think it's just, reasonable goals. Show up and just experience and just give yourself a permission to just be there. Right
Yeah.
before I met you, I was chilling out we went to an event, women's of media event, and I was sitting and I went, it's okay. You don't have to like run around the room. You can sit here. And then somebody came over to me, the mutual contact, and said, you should meet her. And I think if I was running around the room, I wouldn't have met you and had a good conversation. So you are where you're supposed to be, and give yourself permission to just be, and it'll work out.
Mm, great, great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Jeanne. Thanks, Julienne, for co-hosting with me.
Thank you so
Um,
much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And I want to remind, as always, our audience to go ahead and review this episode if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe. That's how you will not miss any of our episodes, and go to narrative.com, NARATIV.com, where you can learn all about how we help people with their stories, listening, as well as teams, groups, one-on-one coaching. There's really a lot of different things that you can find out there, lots of resources as well. So don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're always happy to listen. So thank you so much. And until next time. All right. Bye, everyone.
Loads of fun.
Bye.
Thank you.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.